Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, citing its lack of technological capabilities, the Korean government drops Boeing's F-15 Silent Eagle, the sole contender for its multi-billion-dollar fighter jet deal. The project is now back to square one. The government will put forth a pension plan this week in line with President Park Geun-hye's campaign pledge. But a strong public backlash is expected as the government will significantly scale back from what the president promised. Plus, US President Barack Obama, addressing the UN General Assembly, pins high hopes on a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear development program and calls for a strong UN resolution on Syria's chemical weapons. Daybreak begins now.
You're watching Daybreak on Wednesday, September 25th, and I'm Choi Yusan here in Seoul. We start with Korea's fighter jet project, a seemingly done deal that's now back to square one. Defying speculation that Boeing's F-15 Silent Eagle would win the multi-billion-dollar bid, Korea announced it would keep looking. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun has more on what led to the surprise decision.
To the surprise of many, no final winner was announced for Korea's fighter experimental project, better known as the FX project, that aims to replace the nation's aging fleet of combat aircrafts. After holding a 2-hour-long meeting presided over by Korean Defense Minister Kim Kwon-jin, the Defense Acquisition Program Administration announced Tuesday that the $7.3 billion deal would be relaunched from square one as no contender met the needs of the Korean government and the Korean Air Force. Defense Ministry spokesman Kim Min-seok told reporters immediately after the meeting that Boeing's F-15 Silent Eagle had been the sole candidate because it was the only model that met the Korean government's price range, but said that most of the participating panel voted against the model as Korea's next-generation fighter jet during the meeting.
The majority of the panel voted against, considering North Korea's increasing missile and nuclear threats, as well as the current trend in the global air defense industry that centers around high-tech fighter jets.
Although the F-15 SE has garnered wide acclaim over the years, its limited stealth features have been highlighted as a major weakness. Kim added that the ministry, together with the Defense Acquisition Agency and other related parties, will review the FX deal from the beginning by taking a different approach, one that includes trying to expand the total budget for the project. Officials during the briefing stressed that they'll push through the process promptly in an attempt to fill the air defense vacancy as quickly as possible. It's unclear, however, whether the Korean Air Force will get to deploy new fighter jets by 2017 as scheduled. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
It was a bold promise, but it turns out that once the numbers were crunched, it was a step too far. President Park Geun-hye's signature campaign pledge, in which she promised to give all citizens over the age of 65 a basic pension, is not expected to materialize as originally promised, at least. During her campaign last year, President Park had promised to give all pensioners 200,000 won, or roughly $186 a month. But the Welfare Ministry now says that under the new plan that are due to be announced Thursday this week, senior citizens in the bottom 70% income bracket are expected to be offered a monthly pension of up to $186. Exact figures will be based on any subsidiary income and how much that individual paid into the national pension system. Experts say the president's apparent retreat indicates the pledge would have placed a massive burden on state finances, considering Korea's rapidly aging population. Korea's national debt has been going through the roof since the 2008 financial crisis, and now the interest on that debt has reached the point at which it could threaten the nation's fiscal soundness. Oh Jin-ju lays out the figures and tells us how Korea found itself in its current position.
With Korea's national debt drawing ever nearer to 500 trillion won, that's some $465 billion US dollars, the annual cost of just paying the interest on that debt has also skyrocketed. Data released on Tuesday by Seoul's Finance Ministry and the National Assembly's Strategy and Finance Committee shows that the interest on the government debt for this year has surpassed the 20 trillion won mark, which is around $18.6 billion. This means that every Korean is responsible for over $370 of interest for the government debt. The government spending on interest payments has accounted for only around 6% of its fiscal budget since 2006, but this percentage jumped to 7.7% this year. Experts attribute the increase to a surge in government spending during the global financial crisis. Now, before the 2008 crisis, the country's national debt was on a steady upward trajectory. But the figure began to shoot up in 2009 after the crisis broke, and has continued to go up since then. By the year 2015, the national debt is expected to hit $475 billion. Analysts have voiced concerns that the growing interest payments could eventually push up the government debt again, producing a negative effect on the country's fiscal soundness, and they've called on the government to devise more plans to rein in the national debt. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
The government has issued a warning signal to the market on the recent rise in its currency, resulting from an inflow of foreign capital. The Korean won has strengthened by nearly 9% in the past 3 months, fanning fears it could hurt the nation's exports. Arirang reports.
The government has strengthened its monitoring of the local financial markets, assigning a major influx of foreign capital that can increase volatility in the economy. With the United States Federal Reserve making clear that it could begin tapering off its stimulus programs later this year, foreign money has been flowing into Korea, which has relatively stronger economic fundamentals than most other developing countries.
So they looked around and they saw Korea as being very attractive because we have relatively stronger fundamentals than India or Indonesia, but we have a slightly higher rate of return than the United States or Europe.
The net inflow of foreign capital in the past month alone topped 8.2 trillion won, or roughly $7.7 billion US dollars, pushing the value of the Korean won to the highest level in 8 months on Monday. The Korean currency, which closed at 1,070.4 won to the US dollar on Monday, has gained 8.7% of its value against the greenback in the past 3 months. A high-ranking government official told a meeting with businessmen on Tuesday that given unpredictable changes in global market trends, the sudden influx of foreign capital could mean an abrupt pullout of the money in the future. Even if foreign investors decide to keep their money in the country, experts say a strengthening won could be another problem.
The immediate risk is because all of the capital which is moving in, it's strengthening the won, and that will make our Korean exports uncompetitive.
Experts say until the Fed sends a clearer signal for its monetary policy, Korea is expected to be a better bet for at least weeks to come. But with global investment environment changing rapidly, they say it is important to take precautionary steps to cushion against any future instability. Yurian, Arirang News.
Korea is constantly striving to boost its tourist appeal, and it appears to be working on our neighbors in China, as new data shows a record number of Chinese tourists visited Korea over the last 3 months. The Korea Tourism Organization said Tuesday that roughly 640,000 Chinese nationals visited Korea last month, an increase of 78% compared to the same month last year. The KTO also said the number of visitors to Korea has remained in the upper 70% range from year to year, setting a new record for 3 consecutive months. Experts cited the peak summer holiday season and tourists wanting to avoid Japan because of fears of radiation exposure as possible reasons for the increase in Chinese visitors. Korean consumers are reaching for the plastic more and more at checkout lines these days. The Credit Finance Association of Korea said Tuesday that around $42 billion in payments were made by credit and debit cards in August. That's up nearly 8% compared to the same month last year. The rate of increase for debit card payments climbed by 22%, something the non-profit organization attributes to a government measure last month that maintains the rate of tax deductions through debit card payments at 30%. The tax deduction rate for credit cards was lowered to 10%. Earlier this month, the Korean government expanded its ban on fish and marine-related products from Japan in response to growing concerns of radioactive leaks from the damaged Fukushima nuclear plant. However, the ban doesn't affect processed foods such as candy and baby formula. Our Paul Lee shows us what consumers need to know when purchasing imported goods.
Here in Namdaemun Market in Seoul, one of Korea's largest and oldest traditional markets, international grocery stores are lined with Japanese imported goods, from tasty wasabi beans to beer. But consumer agencies here are urging the public to carefully inspect each and every food label before making purchases, as the ingredients may have been processed in the radiation-affected areas in Japan. Due to radiation contamination concerns, Seoul had expanded its import ban to 50 products from Fukushima and 7 other nearby prefectures in Japan. In addition to fish, the ban now includes leafy vegetables such as cabbage and broccoli. Those import restrictions, however, do not extend to processed foods or raw ingredients. About 7 tons of fishery products from Fukushima were imported in the span of 1 week last month, and local NGOs say the public may be at risk.
Even the main ingredient in baby formula can be fish. There are many loopholes like these when dealing with processed foods.
Agricultural products from Japan are being thoroughly tested every day here for higher than average levels of radioactive cesium or iodine. However, experts say there's no effective way to detect other potentially harmful radioactive materials.
Strontium is similar in nature to calcium, meaning that it's readily observed in bones or other fish cartilage. However, it isn't easily excreted from the body. Also, plutonium is able to emit alpha rays. When in contact with cells, these rays can disrupt the sequence of genetic material, such as DNA.
Consumer groups are calling on the government to ease consumer anxieties by putting in place comprehensive policies that include processed goods from radiation-contaminated areas. Paul Yi, Arirang News. If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world,
Return to the negotiations.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances,
on your way to work or at home,
the legislature will convene a...
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday. U.S. President Barack Obama says a deal that would allow Iran to have its own nuclear program should be possible if Iran acts in a, quote, transparent and verifiable way. Speaking at the UN General Assembly's annual meeting Tuesday, President Obama said he had instructed his Secretary of State, John Kerry, to hold face-to-face negotiations with Tehran regarding its nuclear program. The U.S. leader also laid out Washington's priorities for Syria, as well as the rest of the Middle East and North Africa. Obama said the U.S. always considers diplomatic solutions, but does not rule out the use of military force against extremist threats. With the Syrian government seemingly hesitant to fully give up its chemical weapons, Obama called for a strong UN resolution that would punish Syria if it fails to surrender its stockpile in a verifiable way. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has called on world leaders to stop sending weapons to Syria. Ban's plea came during his opening speech at the 68th General Assembly Summit at the UN headquarters in New York City. He went on to say that world leaders should get the Syrian government and the opposition to the negotiating table to end the nation's civil war, which he called the biggest challenge to peace and security in the world. He urged leaders to reach a political resolution, saying a military victory is an illusion. Ban's remarks come as deep differences have emerged between the U.S. and Russia over the wording of a UN Security Council resolution meant to facilitate the destruction of Syria's chemical weapons by mid-2014. And let's now turn to Reuters for more stories making headlines around the world.
More than 2 million people have fled the violence in Syria, many now living in refugee camps in neighboring countries. More than half are children. They have known war and loss and hunger. One 12-year-old boy remembers his last days in Syria.
In the last 3 weeks in Syria, we were living on bulgur, tomatoes, and sometimes there was a car that brought bread, but it was very expensive. What can I say? The situation was dark and difficult.
Now in a refugee camp in Jordan, he remembers what it's like to go hungry.
When there was no food, my siblings got very hungry, and they would come to me or to my mom and say, "Mom, we are hungry. We want food."
Rights group Save the Children released a report called Hunger in a War Zone, highlighting child malnutrition, with Regional Director Roger Hearns saying the situation is getting worse.
What we are seeing, what other UN agencies, INGOs are seeing is a growing incidence of hunger amongst the population's children.
Save the Children hopes their findings can find a better future for those whose young lives have been marked by war and consumed by hunger.
A daring and complicated rescue in southern China after floodwaters brought on by Typhoon Wusagi strand a family of 7. Rescue workers helped transfer a child from waist-high water onto a balcony. From there, he's moved onto a rooftop, down a ladder, then brought safely to dry land. At least 25 people have been killed since the typhoon hit on Sunday. Some 310,000 have been displaced, with about 8,500 homes being destroyed. Repair work on power lines is ongoing, with power expected to be restored later this week. In total, more than 5 million people have been affected by the flooding and high winds.
A powerful earthquake hit a remote part of southwestern Pakistan Tuesday, and tremors were reportedly felt as far away as the Indian capital of New Delhi. The U.S. Geological Survey said the magnitude 7.7 quake struck near the town of Khuzar in Balochistan province. The province is the nation's largest but least populated. Media reports say at least 45 people died and many homes were damaged. Over to the mall siege in Kenya. Officials there say the hostage crisis is now over and that security forces have taken control of the Westgate shopping center in Nairobi, which was attacked by radical Islamist militants since last weekend. Addressing the nation, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta said 5 of the gunmen were shot dead during the military operation and 11 others are now in custody. The attackers, claiming to be al-Qaeda-linked militant group in Somalia, said in a message on a Twitter account that they were still resisting the Kenyan government for its military involvement in Somalia. At least 67 people have died in the 4-day siege and more than 170 injured.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all. And what a Monday night for Korea's very own choo-choo train Choo Shin-soo, who's having an absolutely amazing season. But on Monday night, he was the hero. The Cincinnati Reds going up against the New York Mets at home. Choo Shin-soo goes 3 for 6 on the night, including a game winner in the bottom of the 10th inning, as the Cincinnati Reds take the game 3-2. With the win, the Reds clinch postseason, but more importantly, Choo Shin-soo with 2 stolen bases on the night finally achieved another 2020 season, as he now sits at 21 home runs and 20 stolen bases. Now, of course, Choo Shin-soo in his final contract year, he is expected to receive as much as $100 million contract this offseason. And staying in the majors, but this time to another Korean major leaguer, Lee Hyun-jin. That's right, with the rookie pitcher having a great season so far with the LA Dodgers, it's time for him to go after his 14th win of the season. Now, the 25-year-old lefty, who's currently 13-7 with a respectable ERA of 3.03, will be going up against the San Francisco Giants, who are struggling this season. And on the mound against Lee will be Matt Cain, who's been struggling as well with a record of 8-9 with an ERA of 4.06. The Dodgers already clinching the NL West. Lee Hyun-jin needs to finish off strong to get himself in the top 3 starting rotation going into the postseason. And more baseball, this time back here in the nation, as we take a look at some Tuesday night's KBO action. Now, we had some rain here in Seoul and the surrounding areas as the Nexen Heroes and the Hanwha Eagles were canceled due to the weather. But the Lotte Giants were able to cruise past the Kia Tigers 8-2, as Kia now sits tied for 7th with the NC Dinos. So with that said, let's take a look at the Samsung Lions taking on the SK Wyverns. Of course, going into the game here, we go to the second inning of the game. Here's Chung Young-sik, a 2-run single to center field as he advances to second on the throw, and right off the bat, the Samsung Lions take an early 2-0 lead. But we're not done yet. Let's make this one 3-0 thanks to Park Han-hee's RBI single to center, and Samsung in control early on. Now we're going to shift over to the 5th inning. Here is Chae Young-woo, drills this one to deep right field, back, got a solo shot to right, and it's 4-0 Samsung. But bottom of the inning, here's Kim Gang-min. He's going to send this one to deep left field as well. 4-1 Samsung Lions. Same inning this time, Chung Sang-ho, and he sends this one to right field. And here it goes. Got another solo shot from the SK Wyverns, and the score is now 4-2. 6th inning of the game, more long ball this time, Kim Tae-won, and here we go, Seiya, a solo shot to deep left field, and Samsung now take a 5-2 lead. Moving to the next inning, remember him, Kim Gang-min with another solo shot to left, his second home run on the night. Next play, Chung Sang-ho at bat, a sac fly to deep right field, cuts the deficit to 5-4, but the Samsung Lions able to hold on to take this game 6-4 as they now take a 1-game lead over the LG Twins. All right, shifting gears to football, where FC Seoul will be going into their semifinals match in the AFC Champions League later tonight against Istiklal FC of Iran. Now, with the first leg of the semifinals kicking off later tonight at the Seoul World Cup Stadium at 7:30 p.m., FC Seoul hopes to take advantage of playing at home for the first leg. While the K-League Classic teams dominated the AFC Champions League last season, FC Seoul is the only Korean team left this season, as Dejan Damjanovic and Molina hope to get them into the finals this season. Meanwhile, FC Seoul is currently in 4th place in the league standings, just trailing Pohang by 3 points. And finishing things off on the ice, more good news for the Korean women's curling team as they beat Canada 9-6 in the China Open finals. The women's team continued to wow all the fans in the sport as they're set to compete in the 2014 Sochi Winter Games for the first time in the nation's history. So congratulations to them, and that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, it's still sprinkling in some of the upper parts of the nation, but towards the afternoon, it should all let up and we will have our sunshine back. But afternoon highs will be hovering 25 degrees Celsius across the region. But right now, lots of clouds are covering up the peninsula, so we are waking up to overcast skies. But later on, we will have plenty of sunshine due to a high-pressure system from China. Now, tomorrow, we are expecting nearly perfect fall weather. We'll have more sunshine, but it will be chillier than today, so please dress accordingly for that. And weather forecast for the rest of the week, temperatures should drop day by day, and morning lows will dip down to low teens tomorrow and Friday. So yes, we gotta get ready for this, but don't worry, we'll jump up into the upper teens on the weekend with afternoon highs hovering in the low to mid 20s. Well, morning lows for today is about 4 degrees cooler than yesterday, but please note that we are still above the seasonal average, which is 15.2 degrees Celsius. With that, let's take a look at morning lows and afternoon highs for today. The capital started out at 18 degrees Celsius, but it will rise to 23 degrees Celsius. That's 73 degrees in Fahrenheit. And afternoon highs in Daegu, Gwangju, and Busan will be topping out at mid-20s. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju, Daejeon should get up to 24, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang stay cool with a sunshine and some of the drizzle. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world.
And that's it for this edition of Daybreak, and we'll be back tomorrow at the same time at 6 a.m. Korea time.